The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, Prince William and Kate Middleton, have just departed for Wales to attend the celebration of St. David's Day, an important national holiday filled with pride for the local people. This trip carries a formal atmosphere while maintaining a warm and approachable spirit, a familiar hallmark of how the royal couple always connects with the community. Early morning at Heathrow Airport, London, awakens to its usual bustling rhythm. The announcements echo through the terminals, the aroma of coffee drifts through the air, and streams of people move back and forth. In that moment, a black SUV quietly pulls up in front of Terminal 5. The door opens slightly and Princess Charlotte appears dressed simply, a navy blue coat, jeans, and white sneakers. At just 9 years old, she exudes a natural ease without any hint of extravagance, but her sharp eyes and confident stride are enough to draw curious glances from the crowd. If you found this story interesting, leave a comment with the number 1. If not, leave a comment with the number 0. Don't forget to share the video and share your thoughts in the comments below to let us know what you think. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any exciting videos about the royal family. Now let's get started with the story. No one recognized the young girl as a princess. Busy with their duties, airport staff unknowingly asked Charlotte to leave the terminal area, assuming she was just a lost child wandering on her own. Without explanation, without ceremony, they escorted her outside. Charlotte stood there alone in the biting wind sweeping through the airport entrance, her coat fluttering gently in the cold air. Everything changed the moment Prince William arrived. With a calm yet commanding presence, he walked into the terminal. No spotlight, no fanfare, just quiet authority. The atmosphere seemed to shift, falling silent in response to his arrival. Airport staff, realizing their mistake, grew visibly flustered and rushed to apologize. They hadn't imagined that the unassuming little girl was in fact Princess Charlotte. That brief moment, though fleeting, left a lasting impression not only on those who witnessed it, but on the royal family as well. Princess Charlotte didn't come to Heathrow to bask in the flash of cameras or waves of adoring crowds. Today, the 9-year-old was on her way to Edinburgh to attend a charity event for children, one of her first royal duties, gently encouraged by her parents, Prince William and Princess Kate. They've always aimed to give their children the most normal upbringing possible, and for Charlotte, that meant walking into the terminal on her own. No bodyguards, no formalities, just herself. Amid the bustling crowd at Terminal 5, Charlotte clutched her ticket tightly, her heart a mix of nerves and quiet confidence. Dressed in a navy coat, jeans, and white sneakers, she looked like any ordinary young girl. Her neatly tied hair swayed gently as she walked up to the check-in counter. Charlotte had mentally prepared for this journey, or at least she thought she had. Behind the counter, Sarah, a young airport staffer, was busy juggling the rush of peak-hour passengers. Tired from her early shift, she wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary. To her, Charlotte was just another teenage traveler, sweet, polite, and a little shy. Next, Sarah called out, eyes still fixed on her screen. Charlotte stepped forward, offering a soft smile as she handed over her ticket. "Good morning," she said, her voice clear and bright. Sarah took the ticket, pausing for a moment, as she noticed the intricate emblem embossed on it, an unusual detail for a child traveling alone. Her brow furrowed slightly with suspicion as she looked up. "Is this your ticket?" she asked, her voice tightening just a bit. "Yes," Charlotte replied softly, her cheeks flushing under the weight of Sarah's scrutinizing gaze. "Do you have any ID?" Sarah pressed. Charlotte hesitated. She remembered her parents' instructions, "Be humble, don't flaunt who you are." But was this the moment to speak up? "I don't have any ID with me," she whispered, "but I'm Princess Charlotte of Wales." Charlotte's words hung in the air like an unbelievable riddle. Sarah froze, trying to process what she had just heard. She glanced at the girl, then at the ticket, her eyes flickering between suspicion and confusion. Instinctively, she reached for her radio. "Hold on a moment," Sarah said, her voice stiff before turning away to contact a colleague. Charlotte's heart began to race, the tension creeping in as the air around her grew heavier, like the quiet before something big was about to unfold. Another staff member stepped out from behind the counter, older with silver-streaked hair and sharp, serious eyes that spoke of years navigating countless complicated situations in his aviation career. He took the ticket from Sarah's hand, examining every detail with practiced precision, then looked up at Charlotte. His expression was unreadable, adding to the tension as if he were weighing a decision that could shift the course of everything. "Is there someone we can contact to confirm your identity?" He asked, his voice calm but authoritative, like it was a question he'd asked 100 times before, always in service of keeping every passenger safe. Charlotte stood still, taking a deep breath to steady herself, an instinct honed through years of growing up in the royal spotlight where every gesture was carefully measured. "My father is Prince William," she said, her voice clear and confident without the slightest hesitation, as if reminding herself of who she truly was. "You can contact Kensington Palace to confirm. They'll verify it immediately." The man gave a brief nod, a flicker of surprise crossing his face, before it was quickly replaced by his composed professional demeanor. He turned to Sarah, his tone firm and commanding. "Verify immediately," he said, allowing no room for delay, as if this procedure had to be carried out swiftly and precisely to keep the line of waiting passengers flowing without disruption. Charlotte stood frozen in place, her fingers gripping the ticket so tightly that the joints turned white, as if it were her last treasure keeping her afloat amid rising waves of anxiety. She thought silently about the flight ahead, meant to be a simple check-in, a peaceful escape from everyday pressures, but now everything had become complicated by the suspicious glances around her, making her feel like a stranger in a crowded place. Whispered murmurs spread behind the counter, hushed conversations among staff, thickening the tense atmosphere. Then another employee named Frank stepped in, narrowing his eyes as if trying to piece together the fragments of a blurry puzzle, his brows furrowed deep in thought. He said nothing at first, but his presence alone made Charlotte feel as though she were under a microscope. "Sorry, Miss Sarah," finally spoke, her voice still tinged with hesitation, despite her effort to stay calm, her hand resting lightly on the counter as if seeking extra confidence. "We need to verify your claim thoroughly. It's very unusual for a minor to travel alone in business class, and we must follow strict safety regulations to protect all passengers and prevent any potential risks." Charlotte blinked quickly, trying to suppress the rising frustration inside her, feeling as if everything was being blown out of proportion. "That's my seat," she said quietly, her tone firm but not harsh, hoping they would understand that everything was legitimate, that her purpose was simply an ordinary trip with nothing suspicious, and she didn't want to make a fuss. But Sarah turned away, her fingers tapping rapidly across the keyboard, fully focused on the verification process without glancing back at Charlotte. The steady clatter of keys echoed like the ticking of a countdown clock. Silence enveloped the space, leaving Charlotte alone with her tangled thoughts, a sudden wave of loneliness crashing over her amid the bustling airport. She stood there immersed in a moment where her royal blood seemed to hold no meaning, and suspicion seeped through every glance from staff and passengers around her. Each minute dragged on endlessly, no comfort offered, no help extended, and still no one recognized who she truly was amidst the rushing crowd. The world spun dizzyingly around her, making her feel invisible like a lost ghost wandering the vast expanse of the airport, where everyone was caught up in their own journeys. Finally, after what felt like an endless wait, the staff quietly signaled to her. One of them spoke softly but professionally. "Please wait in the lounge while we complete the formalities." Charlotte walked slowly, hoping everything would soon be clarified without leaving any unpleasant memories from this journey. But why exactly was she being isolated like this? What silent alarm had been triggered behind those whispered conversations? Stay with us to find out more, because the answer may surprise you, especially when what unfolds inside the lounge comes to light. Charlotte stood frozen, her eyes fixed on Sarah as she turned back to face her, her expression unreadable, a mask hiding whatever emotions lay beneath. Sarah's calm, almost mechanical tone only made the situation worse, sounding like an announcement stripped of any empathy. "I'm afraid I'll have to escort you to the waiting area," Sarah said firmly, without hesitation. "We need to verify the payment for your seat." It wasn't a simple request. It was a decision made final and unchangeable. Charlotte's heart pounded wildly in her chest, echoing like drums beating inside her head. This was no longer a minor mistake, no ordinary mishap. Something had shifted abruptly, thickening the tense air like the heavy silence before a storm, carrying with it nameless fears. Swallowing hard, Charlotte felt her throat tighten, overwhelmed by rising anxiety and confusion. "My parents," she began, her voice trembling as if on the verge of breaking, struggling to explain in hopes of salvaging the situation. But Sarah signaled to someone nearby with a swift, decisive gesture, allowing no room for further words. A man in a Navy uniform approached his steps, quick and steady, clearly seasoned in handling emergencies. His shoulders were squared and his voice carried a tone that brooked no negotiation. "Please follow me," he said, brief but authoritative, leaving Charlotte with no choice. The world around her seemed to slow down like a slow-motion film as she glanced back one last time at the bustling airport. People laughed and chatted meticulously, checked their luggage, grabbed coffee to unwind, but no one looked her way. No one noticed the loneliness enveloping her. No one recognized who she truly was. To them, she was just a young girl in a simple coat standing awkwardly alone in the vast terminal, when in reality she should have been gliding through with the quiet confidence of a true princess. She thought of her parents, who had always been by her side in every situation. Surely they had no idea this was happening. They had told her this trip was important, that she was ready to represent something greater than herself, a mission with symbolic meaning. And yet now she felt abandoned, like a problem no one wanted to deal with, the loneliness sinking in deeper with every passing second. She followed the man in silence, her small frame moving without a sound as her shoes touched the polished tile floor, each step heavy with tangled thoughts and the quiet ache of isolation. Around her, the adults loomed like living statues, moving with clear purpose, while she was led down a long, shadowed corridor that seemed to lead nowhere. Charlotte recalled her training, the strict lessons on composure under pressure, staying calm before crowds, never losing control, never crying or drawing attention. Steady in spirit, that was the rule she'd always lived by. They reached a side room where the silence felt almost suffocating. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, like distant insects flickering gently, as if even they were unsure of what was about to unfold. The space pulsed with tension and anticipation, wrapping her in a stillness that seemed to hold its breath. The room was bare, stripped of comfort, and the door clicked shut behind her with a soft, chilling finality, sealing her off as if into a world of her own. The silence inside was almost too loud, pressing heavily on her mind, turning her thoughts into a chaotic swirl. Charlotte clutched her boarding pass tightly, as if it were the only proof she had that this journey was real, something solid to hold on to amidst the unraveling uncertainty. If you enjoyed this story and want to learn more, don't forget to like, share the video, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any exciting videos. Now let's continue the story together. Then the door opened once more, the soft creak of the hinge echoing in the cramped room. Another staff member entered, older weariness etched clearly into his face, the fatigue of long shifts evident in his tired eyes. His name tag read plainly George. He looked at Charlotte carefully, then down at the boarding pass still clenched in her hand, assessing the situation with quiet precision. "I'm sorry for the delay," he said quickly, his tone carrying a trace of apology, though still wrapped in professionalism. "But we can't process your boarding pass until we complete full verification." The system flagged it for review. The words hit Charlotte like a sudden blow, her chest tightening with a fresh wave of anxiety. "Flagged," she repeated, her voice trembling, slightly caught off guard and unsettled. "But my parents, they're waiting for me in Edinburgh. They're expecting me to arrive safely." George nodded slowly, his lips pressed into a thin, hesitant line, as if carefully weighing his next words. "I understand," he said, not unkindly, but with no room for debate, and without asking further about the payment. "You won't be able to board at this time." He continued, his voice calm but resolute. Charlotte clenched her jaw, fighting the surge of emotion rising inside her. She would not cry. Not here. Not now. She had been taught to remain composed, no matter the circumstance. George turned to another staff member nearby, his tone shifting into quiet command. "Call the number on file," he instructed crisply. "We need to get this cleared up quickly before it causes any more trouble." Charlotte stood motionless, her breathing steadying and slowing even as panic surged beneath the surface like an undertow. She knew her parents couldn't be reached easily right now. They were occupied with duties of their own. She wasn't supposed to bother them over something like this. They had promised this trip would help her grow a chance to prove she was ready for bigger challenges ahead. But now it all felt like a test. She hadn't prepared for a sudden trial in a strange place that left her feeling abandoned. Time dragged on every second, stretching unbearably. The room remained unchanged, bare walls, stifling air, and the constant low hum of the overhead lights echoing in steady, dull rhythm as if mocking her stillness. The voices outside the door reminded Charlotte that the world was still moving fast, loud, and indifferent while she remained frozen in place, caught in the middle of an unexpected storm. She glanced at the staff beyond the desk. Frank shook his head slowly, his face pensive and clouded with thought. Sarah's expression, once tightly restrained, had softened slightly, as if she were trying to remain calm amid the tension of the moment. Something was shifting. A subtle change, imperceptible at first, but Charlotte could feel it. She didn't know what it was, only that the air felt a little easier to breathe, now the walls around her seeming a fraction less oppressive. Then George picked up the phone. His voice, low and steady, took on a different weight, deeper, more urgent, as he spoke to someone on the other end of the line. There was no mistaking it. He was dealing with something important. Sarah's eyes glanced toward the computer screen, her eyebrows slightly furrowing, revealing intense concentration. Another man leaned in close, whispering something to George in a low voice, quiet enough not to be overheard, yet loud enough to draw attention. Though the words were soft, Charlotte felt each syllable ripple through the air like a hidden signal full of meaning, sparking her curiosity. Something had clearly changed. Then the door opened once again, the soft creak sounding almost dramatic. A new figure stepped inside, very different from the others, with a far more professional appearance. His uniform was impeccable, every detail sharp and precise, and his presence carried the weight of someone well known and obeyed without question. He didn't glance around the room. He looked straight at Charlotte, his gaze sharp and focused. Without a word, he turned to George. "We need to act quickly," he said, his tone serious and urgent, as if time itself was the deciding factor. Charlotte held her breath, struggling to stay calm amid the confusion. Act, go, where, why, now? Her heart pounded loudly in her ears and a wave of helplessness surged within her. But before she could ask a single question, something far more surprising happened. Her father entered, stepping into the room with a worried yet authoritative expression, like a sudden ray of hope piercing through the darkness. But why did his face, instead of bringing calm, suddenly make everyone in the room fall into a tense silence? Stay tuned to find out more. Prince William stepped into the room, and immediately the atmosphere in the small space stiffened, mixed with discomfort and silent panic spreading everywhere. The staff anxiously stood close to the walls, whispering worriedly to each other while glancing at Princess Charlotte, who sat quietly trying to maintain her composure amid the unexpected situation. Her small hands clenched tightly together, as if seeking comfort from herself. Her ticket was finally confirmed as valid, but the emotional damage had already been done, making her feel like an outsider, unrecognized, doubted, and pushed aside simply because she lacked a crown or bodyguards by her side as usual. But then, in an unexpected moment that none of them had anticipated, the door opened once again, the soft creak of the hinge echoing through the quiet room. Everyone turned in surprise. The staff thought it might be another supervisor coming to handle the unfolding chaos. Yet as the figure stepped inside, everyone held their breath, and the atmosphere suddenly grew heavier. It wasn't the airport manager, nor a traveler or security officer. It was Prince William himself, tall, composed, and radiating a royal presence unmistakable to anyone. He stepped in with a calm authority that seemed to shrink the entire room, as if everything around him compressed under his presence. His eyes immediately locked onto his daughter, filled with worry and protectiveness. In that moment, Charlotte's expression shifted from quiet defiance to an indescribable relief, as if a heavy burden had just been lifted. Her father was here not only as a parent, but as the future king carrying an innate authority. Sarah, the first staff member who had challenged Charlotte, fell silent instantly, her voice fading away. She instinctively took a step back as William's gaze slowly swept across the room, carrying an unspoken sternness. Without saying a word more, his mere presence was enough to awaken a sense of responsibility in everyone, a silent reminder of the consequences of their actions. "Can someone explain why my daughter was removed from the plane?" Prince William's voice was steady and calm, yet beneath it burned an unmistakable intensity, demanding a clear and immediate answer. Now, Sarah stammered, her professionalism completely unraveling under the pressure. "Your Highness, we didn't recognize the mistake. Her ticket is valid." William cut her off, his tone much firmer, allowing no further excuses, and she identified herself. Yet she was interrogated, suspected, and taken to that room as if she were a security threat, a 9-year-old child. Charlotte stayed silent, watching her father's protective instincts rise like a wall of steel, shielding her from the emotional storm swirling around them. Frank, the man standing beside Sarah, stepped forward, visibly trembling with tension. "Sir, we deeply regret this misunderstanding. We truly had no idea." William didn't respond right away. He didn't need to. His silence said more than words ever could. "You didn't know because you didn't listen, because you assumed, because you saw a young girl traveling alone and decided she didn't belong here." The silence that followed was deafening, a pause heavy with the weight of accountability pressing down on every soul in the room. Sarah's voice caught as she spoke, trying to regain her composure. "Your Highness, I am truly sorry. I was only following protocol. We never intended to cause harm. But harm has already been done." William replied, his tone firm and uncompromising. "Your intentions don't matter. You humiliated a member of the royal family and, more importantly, a child. My child." Tension peaked as Sarah's calm completely unraveled. Her voice trembled, pleading. Please accept my apology. We never meant to cause any pain. We beg for your understanding." William looked at Charlotte, his expression softening, showing the love of a father. "Are you all right?" Charlotte nodded gently, her voice quiet but steady. "I'm all right, Father." He turned back to the staff, his voice growing firmer, ready to bring this situation to a just conclusion. "Make sure this never happens again. William said with quiet authority, his gaze sweeping across each employee like a lasting reminder. Frank nodded quickly, his voice shaky with regret. "Absolutely, sir. We'll take immediate steps to improve our procedures." Almost instantly, the atmosphere in the room shifted lighter, yet still heavy with remorse. Apologies poured out from the staff as they scrambled to make things right, handing Charlotte back her ticket with gestures more remorseful than words could express. A manager offered her a gift voucher as a gesture of goodwill, his voice quiet and sincerely apologetic. Another staff member nervously asked if she'd like to be personally escorted to the gate, his eyes full of a desperate desire to make amends. But William gave a curt nod, politely but firmly declining. "We'll handle it ourselves." As they turned to leave, heads bowed across the room. The same employees who had doubted just minutes earlier now stood visibly shaken, whispering about the royal confrontation that would no doubt echo through the halls of Heathrow for days to come. What started as a quiet misunderstanding had erupted into a royal reckoning, and though Charlotte hadn't said much, her composure spoke volumes. Her father had voiced what she couldn't, but the lesson had been delivered by them both, and delivered deeply. As they stepped out of the room, Charlotte cast a final glance back at the stunned faces behind them, her mind swirling with quiet reflection. A part of her wondered, would they whisper about this later out of shame, or truly change because of that conversation with her father? But the real question lingered softly in her heart. What would he say to her when it was just the two of them again? Stay close to find out. Because what followed wasn't just a father's concern, it was the quiet unveiling of a deeper royal truth, one that no one had expected. A lesson not of protocol, but of identity. A profound teaching from a father to Princess Charlotte. She walked beside her father, Prince William. Her small fingers curled gently around his hand as they moved through the terminal's private corridor. Her footsteps were light and steady, almost too steady for someone so young who had just endured one of the most humiliating, disorienting moments of her life. Her mind was still tangled in questions, echoes of a cold room, and the buzz of fluorescent lights above like angry insects swarming unseen. And now she walked beside the future king, not for ceremony or celebration, but because everything had unfolded so far from what she had expected. Prince William glanced at her, his expression unreadable, but his firm grip on her hand offered a silent kind of reassurance, a quiet gesture of encouragement. "You held yourself well today," he said, his voice low but commanding, carrying the pride of a father who had seen more than he let on. Charlotte didn't answer right away. What was there to say? Her father hadn't been there when she needed him most, when strangers looked at her like she was nobody at all. When the staff asked for her name, and an entire room full of adults acted as if she didn't belong there, she finally murmured, her voice barely louder than a breath full of contemplation, "I don't think they recognized me." William sighed softly, almost with guilt, as if admitting a part of his own responsibility. "That's probably true," he said, his tone sincere and unguarded, "but that doesn't make it right." She looked up at him, surprised by his frankness. His voice carried no royal airs, just honest truth from the heart. "Do you think they treated me that way because I wasn't with you?" She asked the question, hanging between them like a thick, uneasy fog waiting for a genuine answer. Prince William paused briefly in the quiet corridor, carefully guarded and meticulously cleaned so they could pass through without disturbance. "Some people value the uniform," he said cautiously, his voice calm, as if sharing a profound lesson. "Some value wealth, but not everyone sees the worth in what they don't understand." Charlotte nodded slowly, yet the ache deep in her chest remained like an unhealed wound. They treated me as if I were lying, as if I didn't belong there, she thought silently, her gaze distant. William knelt down in front of her, bringing them eye to eye, a gesture not of a prince, but of a loving father. "Charlotte, people only see what they want to see," he said, his voice warm and steady. "You did nothing wrong. You stood your ground. That is more than most grown men could do." After a brief silence, he added softly, "But now it's my turn." They continued walking, and as they approached the central security checkpoint, the staff who had once looked at Charlotte with suspicion now stood frozen in awe at the presence of Prince William. An officer nearly dropped his radio before straightening up quickly and nodding, his voice filled with concern. "Your Highness," he said, clearly worried. "We apologize for earlier. It was a misunderstanding." "What's going on?" William asked, his tone suddenly sharp and commanding, carrying undeniable authority. The officer's mouth opened and closed, unsure how to respond, his face betraying confusion. Charlotte watched her father handle the moment with a power she still didn't fully understand. He didn't need to shout or demand an apology. He simply was who he was, and that alone was enough to turn the world upside down. He gently turned back just enough to glance at his daughter, his voice soft. "Stay close to me," he said. And she followed, stepping close beside her father, feeling safer amidst the crowd. As they passed through security, there were no questions this time, no obstacles. Charlotte noticed how people moved around her father like gravity pulling toward a star, and she realized it wasn't just about being seen, it was about being felt. Back in the lounge, Prince William sat down, the weight of the morning settling into his posture, making him look tired yet still dignified. Charlotte sat beside him, glancing around the elegant room filled with hushed conversations and gleaming silver teapots, a world completely different from the cold, cramped waiting room where she had been confined earlier. However, the pain hadn't eased, and she spoke up. "That's strange," she said, her voice soft but thoughtful. "A few minutes ago, they looked at me like I was nothing. Now they're bowing." William smiled wearily, his eyes full of understanding. "Sometimes the world works that way. But remember, people like that don't get to define who you are. You're the one who defines yourself." Charlotte looked away, biting her lower lip, struggling to hold back her emotions. "Do you ever wish you could disappear for a while without being a prince?" she asked, her voice curious but tinged with sadness. William was silent for a long moment, as if weighing his words. "Yes, many times too many to count," he replied, his tone sincere and close. "But then I remember who's watching," he continued, his voice growing stronger. "Not the cameras, the people. Those who need strength even if they don't realize it. That's why we keep going." Charlotte stared at him, digesting every word. Her heart still ached, but something was forming inside, a fresh, steadfast resolve. What they took from her this morning they would never take again, she thought, feeling a growing strength within. Suddenly, a swift flight attendant entered, her tone professional and polite. "Your Highness, the plane is ready for boarding. We can escort you to the gate right now." William stood up, straightening his coat and offering his hand to his daughter in a protective gesture. She took it without hesitation, feeling more confident than ever. As they walked toward the gate, passengers whispered among themselves, not pointing at Charlotte, but at her father. Yet this time she didn't feel invisible. She felt strong, not because of the man beside her, but because of what she had endured on her own. Thank you all for following this royal story until the end. If you were Prince William, how would you handle the staff's mistake? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. If you found this story captivating, don't forget to share the video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss out on more exciting videos. See you in the next videos.